On this episode, we get back into Bangkok's 7 deadly sins with a discussion on wrath.
So, if you've ever pondered whether Thais take their anger out on others less, more, or about the same as other countries, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 on a secret mission to export the power of the mighty maple leaf, but ended up liking Thailand so much I forgot my mission and just ended up chilling out on Koh Samet.
It's not a bad life.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a 1-year teaching contract 20 years ago. Fell in love with the peace that comes from not knowing what anyone around me is saying. So I never left.
Could you consider that a form of meditation?
It's peaceful. It's
like I was at Starbucks this afternoon and someone started speaking English at a nearby table. I'm like, what are you doing? I can understand you. Stop it.
So annoying. So annoying. Sure. All right. And a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about Greg's attempt to use the government hotel promotional discount on a trip to Hua Hin, the origins of Thailand's vegetarian festival, or as Greg would call it, the Fried Starch Festival. And we check in on the ongoing protest, discussing the mysterious third hand that in all likelihood does not exist. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Yeah, before we get into it, I want to do a quick shout out. Ed, check this out. When I was in Hua Hin, I was sitting by the pool, just sort of checking my phone and then checking to make sure my kid was still had his head above the water in the swimming pool and eating some medium-sized pizza and chatting to my wife. And I hear this guy next to me. He's like, "Excuse me, are you Greg?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I listened to the show."
Wow.
As one of our listeners. Yeah, our buddy Mike was down staying at the same hotel as us.
Nice.
Yeah, so we got to talking. He's a super cool guy. And then he's down there with his 2 kids and his wife. And my son and his kids ended up playing all day in the pool.
Very funny.
And we got a play date set up now.
Wow. Dude, you are a celebrity. You're getting recognized in public.
It's us, man. If it was you sitting there, you'd probably recognize your voice too.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, did he say it was your voice? He just like overheard your voice? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what he said. He's like, my voice is familiar. So my voice is my passport. Verify me.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So cool meeting Mike. And I look forward to meeting any other random listeners out in public, which is cool, but kind of freaky.
Right.
All right. Well, on this episode, we continue with our series on Bangkok's 7 deadly sins. And we are turning our attention this week to wrath. Now, the angle that we're taking for this show is thus. Thais are well known as nice, friendly, and prone to avoid conflict and confrontation at all costs. This can sometimes cause problems for foreigners who spend time with Thais, as they sometimes prefer a more direct approach with things such as giving and even accepting public criticism with the aim of improving, telling jokes at someone's expense, or even having a full-on public argument to air some dirty laundry, only to go and get a beer afterward knowing that you've let off some steam. Generally speaking, Thais hold their tongue much more than Westerners do. But when Thais decide to let you have a piece of their mind, brother, you will not forget it, because in some cases, it crosses the threshold between getting even and full-on wrath. So we have to ask, do Thais take their anger out on others more, less, or just differently than we are used to in the West? So what do you think, Ed?
Well, man, I love this type of topic, although all we can really do is speculate and goof around about it.
Yeah.
But honestly, I have a theory that fits perfectly for this, and I just came up with this a long time ago. And, at first I thought that, wow, there's just less anger, less harshness in Thailand than the West. Like that just was one of my initial impressions. I was just like, wow, people just seem to be a lot less angry here, you know?
Yeah.
But then over time, I kept coming across these anecdotes where Thai people would explode, and it sometimes resulted in violence or death or murder. And I just came across these things periodically, and I kind of updated my theory. So I don't think there's less total anger in Thailand, but I do think that on a daily basis, they repress negative feelings on a daily basis. They act chill, everything's fine. And this whole my Penrai attitude. So they have to say my Penrai for a long time. And I think what's happening is the negativity is building up.
Interesting. So you're saying that most cultures have like the same base level of anger. It's just that in Thailand, it's under the surface, deeper under the surface.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be clear. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But imagine if, but just imagine, just imagine that every culture had the same total amount of anger. That's what I'm saying now. That's my new theory. My new theory is that there's actually the same amount of anger in Thailand on average.
Okay.
But I think they express it differently. That's the key. So I think they act chill for a very long time, and I think things build up and then they explode.
So what you're saying is that Western countries are sort of like the faucet in my bathroom, which is always kind of leaking a little bit.
That's right.
So when I step into the bathroom, my socks get a little bit wet if I'm wearing my socks. But Thais are more like Old Faithful, the geyser in Yellowstone Park.
It explodes, right?
Which is calm and all cool on the surface, but then every once in a while, kabloom!
That's right. That's just my theory. Dude, I've got examples. I know you've got some, so let's chat about this. And maybe our listeners will understand what we're talking about. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is extremely unpleasant. So I'm issuing a trigger warning. So I'm going to talk about some crazy thing.
Wow, this is the first trigger warning on the Bangkok podcast.
Well, this goes all the way back to 2003 or 2004 when I was reading the Bangkok Post every day, as we talked about on a previous show. And I turned the page of the Bangkok Post, and the headline was something like Thailand leads world in penis hacking.
Yes, that old standby.
I remember I saw this article. I was like crazy because I ended up cutting the article out and taping it on my wall for several years because I just thought it was a crazy story. And the story was about how the generic case would be a woman, a wife, cutting off her husband's penis while he's sleeping. Typically for retribution for his infidelity. And the article made clear that Thailand by far had more penis hackings than any other country in the world, but subsequently also developed a medical surgical specialty in penis reattachment.
I'm still just trying to get over the fact that you put that article on your wall. Please tell me it was a one article stuck on your wall and not like an article added to your corkboard of penis hacking stories that you've clipped on the paper.
No, I did not have a wall of penis hacking stories.
Okay, that's good.
No, I just thought it was the craziest, but also scariest thing. What's more scary for a guy than to be worrying about, that if he falls asleep, he's going to wake up without his.
Well, you're right. And that was about the time. I mean, I remember when Lorena Bobbitt did the same thing to her husband in America.
That's right.
I mean, it was the story of the century. It was huge news.
Right. But then it got reattached and reused, apparently.
Right. And the act became quite more common. And like you said, Thailand leads the world in two types of surgery: sexual reassignment surgery and penis reattachment surgery.
Right. Well, I have to, so on the one hand,
not going to be a whole show about penis reattachment.
Right.
By the way.
On the one hand, this is just a silly thing to talk about. But on the other hand, I think it does support this idea that Thai women might put up with a lot more before they protest. So, and again, I really don't know what I'm talking about. This is just a theory. But I imagine maybe a westernized women or Western women, they might express negativity towards their husband a little bit at a time, or as soon as they see something they don't like, then they say no. And maybe Thai culture teaches Thai women to just be nice and polite and say "my penrai," no problem, and then so maybe resentment builds up more.
So I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, and of course, in Thai culture, it's very, very common for men to have a mia noi or a woman on the side, or a man on the side, or someone on the side, and it's just kind of generally, not all the time, but generally seen as out of sight, out of mind. But once confronted with the inevitable truth and the unavoidable truth of it all, they might just blow their top and grab a knife. So yeah, I can see that.
That's right. Now, I couldn't find the exact article I saw in 2004, but believe it or not, I found another one that was actually from the year 2004. And I have to read this just because I have to. So this is a news story about penis reattachment. And the newspaper is interviewing a doctor, or a reattachment guy. And he says, if you have mistresses, they will get mad and cut it at any time. So make her very happy. Always carry a thermos to put it in, and keep the name of a good doctor close by.
Always carry a thermos.
That's his advice. Basically saying if you're married to a Thai woman and you're cheating, he's basically saying keep a thermos close to the bed.
Hey, here's Joe. Here's this penis thermos. Always with him.
Anyway, now we can move on, I think, from this topic. But this idea of a Thai woman tolerating something for a long time and being super sweet and super nice, but then inside this anger and resentment is building up. I think that supports our theory, man.
Well, I think that definitely there's lots of cases where we can cite that the Thais have gone from 0 to 60 immediately.
Yes.
And the first case that comes to mind was when in 2006, there was that mentally disturbed man down on Rama 1 Road, and he took out a hammer and he smashed the idol at the Erawan Shrine, which is a very, very popular shrine.
That's right. Ratchaprasong intersection, right?
Yeah. And he smashed it and ran off. And the crowd that was there chased him down and beat him to death on the sidewalk in front of the Four Seasons Hotel just up the street. So they redlined immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was going to be my other example. Besides the scorned woman, it's kind of the mob justice thing. The kind of and it's not all just mob justice. It's this idea that the few lines that do exist here are absolute. So there's not a lot of rules here, but there's a few rules. And then if you cross one of those rules, then the maximum punishment is allowable.
That's an interesting way to put it. And that's also dovetails with something that our buddy John says sometimes. He said in Thailand, there are no rules until there are rules.
That's right.
And they're absolutely unbreakable.
That's right.
You cannot mess with them.
Right. Well, in this case, it seems like certain things, I think in this case, insulting a shrine. Now, in this case, it's actually a Hindu shrine, not a Buddhist shrine, but it's kind of beloved by Thai people and kind of seen as a part of maybe Thai Buddhism, right?
Yeah.
And so, a direct insult to religion, like a very direct insult to religion, that's just over the line. And the crowd just exploded and actually killed him on the street.
Yeah, like there's no room for nuance in that. Like it's
in this case, the guy was mentally ill, which I mean, it's a horrible thing either way. But in this case, it was particularly tragic. Yeah.
Another thing that we've talked about on the show a lot of times before is that as a foreigner, if you ever get into an argument or a quarrel or someone with a Thai guy, you automatically need to lose that fight and say I'm sorry and walk away, because if you push it. Even say if you get into a physical fight, pretty soon you're going to find yourself on the beating end of 15 of this guy's friends, and they're going to give you the beat down of your life, because again, it's one of those things where there's just
that's right.
It's combined with the whole losing face thing and the masculinity thing, and they just redline immediately. So that's another example of.
I think a lot of it is kind of a public face thing, but it just means that once the violence starts, it's not going to be moderated. It's just once it's on, then anything is acceptable.
Yeah.
So, dude, this ties in with a theory I have about Thai soap operas. Soap operas are super popular in Thailand. Actually, Thai ones, but also Korean ones and Japanese ones. But I'm talking about Thai lakon soap operas, like melodramas. In these, whenever I've seen them on TV, the characters always seem to be very dramatic. Now, of course, it's a TV show. It's supposed to be dramatic. But when I watch these shows, I always think that, Thai people just don't act like this. It's like the woman will be like yelling and screaming at her mother, or like two guys will be like yelling at each other, and it's just
Right.
everyone's like screaming or crying or having sex. It's just like it's when I say melodrama, it's the real deal.
Right.
But I just don't know Thai people who are this outgoing and this dramatic, and so I think maybe those shows are maybe what the Thai people are feeling. It's like these maybe Thai women are repressing their emotions, and what they really would like to be doing is like yelling and screaming, and then so they turn on a lacan, and then that's what the actress is doing.
Interesting. So they're sort of like living vicariously through these ridiculous soap operas.
Yeah, I think so. It's, and again, this is it might seem like a tangent, but I was talking to my students about the current protests and the age of those involved, and they were saying that my students who are university students, they were talking about like these high school students, and they were saying, wow, they just seem a little bit different. Traditionally you would say they're not being as Thai, because the bottom line is they're acting angry and they're rebelling and they're not being totally polite. These high school kids, So I mean, maybe the culture is changing. Maybe the younger generation, maybe they are getting kind of westernized, and they're more willing to just say, I don't like that.
I've also got a theory that's based on absolutely nothing but my own non-educational observations, and I have no business in stating this, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I think it seems to me sometimes that a lot of Thais take television and pop culture, let's use these lacan soap operas for instance, much more seriously than we would.
In what way?
Well, I just think that they like what you said, they see them as sort of like, oh, that's an example of how you might legitimately act in real life.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, in Western culture, soap operas are like these ridiculous, contrived, derivative, pointless, stupid adult things. But here, like, they're super popular, and I think they're taken a little bit more seriously here. So maybe that they see that as a legitimate reaction to something, like, oh, you think your maid is looking at your boyfriend, so you need to slap her and throw her down on the ground. I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point, but
yeah, I can't tell, but it's. I really think that the way that anger is expressed here, I do think it's different. So I've come to the conclusion that they're not actually less angry. It's just I do think it gets repressed or just ignored. And so when they do express anger, it really is wrath. It's not
right.
It's not just disappointment.
Right. Like I said, like when two Westerners have a disagreement, like you're in an office or something, and you like, let's go into the meeting room and have this out, and you yell and scream, no, it's this way, and that's anger. That's working through your anger.
Right.
Whereas sometimes a person in Thailand might skip that step and go right to wrath and be like, that's it, time for some revenge, time for a beatdown.
Right. Well, all of this is pure speculation, of course. So we want our listeners to give us your opinion. So whether you're a Thai listener or whether you're an expat here, do you buy this? There obviously are Thai people who are Jai Ron, who have a hot temper. So there are individual Thais who I think might be more willing to express anger on a daily basis. But I still think you can make generalizations. I don't think generalizations are always wrong. So, but we'd love to hear your opinions.
Well, as we're wrapping this up then, I found this online. I was doing some research for this podcast, and I found this report, and it's very interesting. I didn't have time to read it all, and I'll read one quick paragraph from it. It's probably got a lot of good information in it, and I don't think this is sort of like, the ultimate summation of the issue, but I thought this paragraph was interesting. And this paper is called A Descriptive Study of Thai Nonverbal Communication by Surya Smutkupt from Portland State University, written in 1976.
Whoa.
Yeah. And this when I was 1 year old. Damn. And it says, this one paragraph says, Thai children, like children from other countries, get angry at each other very often in their daily communication. When they do, they normally do not express their anger verbally because they are strictly taught that a well-mannered or good person must control his emotional behaviors, such as anger. Instead, they adopt a simple mutual hand signal as an innuendo, which is used popularly among Thai children. Maybe this is out of date now. I don't know if they still do that 40 years later.
Interesting.
They verbally form both hands, sometimes only one hand, into fists, fingers up, but with unfolded thumbs pointing towards one opponent. The suspension of their friendly relationship takes effect immediately after the signal is emitted. Verbal utterances rarely accompany the signal. However, occasionally a colloquial word for thumb, bong, is heard accompanying the gesture. Now it's funny they do that thing. Like my ex-girlfriend from years ago used to do that thumb thing to me, and it was like sort of like she was making a thumbs up sign to me, but she would point her thumb at me and saying like that's not good. But she was just playing, but it was an interesting action that she did.
I'm not sure I know this thing. So it's like you point your thumb at someone?
She would make like you're making a thumbs up and then point your thumb at them instead of your finger.
And this is supposed to mean like I disagree or I'm pissed.
Like you're not good, you're bad, or something like that.
Interesting. That maybe that's a bit of old Thai culture then.
Maybe, but this paper from 1976 is basically saying Thai children are taught from a young age not to verbally express their anger.
Right. It's a substitute, right? It's a substitute for expressing anger. Well, what we really need are some true experts in Thai culture or Thai sociology. So please let us know if you're an expert.
Yeah, listeners, we are always looking for experts on any topic about Bangkok. We'd love to talk to someone and learn more because what we do is by no means two experts sitting around hobnobbing.
That's right.
Unless we're talking about beer, music, or movies.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Good discussion. Let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week, Ed, it is all you.
Okay. Got something for you. Very simple. I'm sure it's happened to you many times. Although you might not have thought about this in a while. So you might have to go back to your early memories of staying in Bangkok. All right.
Okay.
All right. Here's the scene. You're in a standard fast food restaurant. It's pretty busy. Maybe somewhat crowded. You finish your meal. You stand up to kind of bust your tray, and you notice that most other people in the restaurant are just finishing and leaving their trays and stuff on the table.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So my question to you, what's your attitude towards like unbussed trays and foodstuffs and plates? And I think that it's much less common in Thailand for people to clear off their own table. So just what do you think about it? Does it bother you?
This is a good one because I am guilty of both sides of this. You know, it's like that old thing, like George Carlin joke. Anyone who drives slower than you is an idiot, and anyone who drives faster than you is a maniac.
Right.
You know, when I'm at a restaurant, like if I happen to be in the mood where I clean up my tray, anyone who doesn't do it is a slob.
Right.
Consider it slob.
Right.
But then, for whatever reason, if I happen not to clean up my tray, I'm like, it's fine. And anyone who cleans up their tray, I'm like, goody two shoes. But generally, I try to do it, and I think it's just a polite thing to do.
So when people don't do it, is it a loathe or a live with?
Live with, because I'm guilty of it too. But I think everyone should do it.
I'm a loathe, man. It really bugs me, and it's funny. I've had friends tell me that the Thai way is better because the restaurants then have to employ bussers, and so it's kind of like you're spreading around the work. So if you bus your own table, you're taking a job from a poor Thai person.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know. I just don't buy it. I don't believe it. It's just my nature. I think you should clean up your own table. Now, it's true, basically because I think at these fast food restaurants, they don't have, normally I don't think they have staff to do that. I mean, obviously in a real restaurant, they're going to clean out the table for you.
Right, yeah. I'm not taking my plates to the back of the sizzler to wash them in the sink or anything like that.
Anyway, unbussed trays in fast food restaurants, I'm a loathe.
I'm a live with. This is the reverse because I'm the Canadian. I should be the one going around every table. I'm so sorry about this. I'm so sorry.
That's funny. All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, you can also listen to each episode on the YouTube. You can chat with us online or even reach out to me directly on Twitter or Instagram, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure. I mentioned to my buddy that he was old, or that we were old, and he said, I prefer the term senescent. And
Senescent.
senescent.
What does that mean?
Senescent. I think it basically means old.
Gradual deterioration of functional characteristics.
Pretty much that's the story of our life.
So when you go to the doctor and he says you have colon senescence, it's a nice way of saying
You're screwed.
bend over. Yeah.